Hello there, everybody. Welcome back for part 2 of the Star Wars character tier list we're doing here on Star Wars Lads. I did get it in to 2 parts, so this will be the last part. Hopefully you all enjoy it. Again, like the video, comment, subscribe, all that jazz. And hopefully you do enjoy this a bit longer video than normal for these tier lists, but this was a major undertaking. Check out part 1 as well. Thanks for watching. Next we have Mace Windu, and this is going to be a fun conversation. I've always loved Mace Windu because I think he's just awesome. I mean, ever since you see Samuel Jackson in the prequels, that got me hyped. You see him kill Jango Fett. Okay, I loved all that. But then you're watching Clone Wars 03 and you see him punching super battle droids, and it's just like, who the heck is this guy? Like, I think it really capped off for me. It was a couple years ago now. We read Shatterpoint, which I absolutely loved. It's one of my favorite Star Wars books ever. I think it does such a great job giving him character. I'd put him at the bottom of A.
I'm not the biggest fan of Mace Windu. As much as Liam is going to be talking about how much, he was such an iconic figure for him, I'm not going to disagree. I actually won't, because I think those are some awesome scenes where he is a cool dude. It's Samuel L. Jackson, man, right? At the end of the day, it's a character made for him. But I still think he's that terrible dude, and I think he's everything wrong about the Jedi. Right now, he's like the very bottom of A. I'll give you that.
Wow, I did not think I was going to win that one, but I'll take it.
Next up, we have the Mandalorian himself, Din Djarin. I love the guy. I really do. Especially season 1 and 2 is awesome with him. Overall, I think he's been one of the best things about canon, and definitely after 2019. So top of B right now. I think he's there with Grogu.
I don't have super strong feelings about Din Djarin. I know, I think one of my takes that a lot of people have criticized the most on this channel is that I just purely have never thought that The Mandalorian was this all-time classic Star Wars thing. I love Mandalorian season 2. And in that way, since we're ranking characters based on all of that, I do think Din Djarin does fall in that top of B. I mean, he's definitely better than Grogu. What could have been a massive arc for his character and for that development was the side arc in the Book of Boba Fett, and that's the idea of existing without Grogu. Next up, we have Maz Kanata, a fun character introduced in the sequels, fun side character. I feel like based on the movies, I might have put her upper C.
I mean, we even got a practical model of her instead of the CGI by the end, right? And that maybe usually means more of an investment in the character, but she was just there. She's great in the High Republic stuff. That's what's been the saving grace for me. I think she's been really fun and exciting in that sense. I still don't mind C, but I would say bottom of B. Next up, we have Mother Talzin. This is a really fascinating character all around. She's really made the Night Sisters more concrete. I think Night Sisters and Legends, especially early Legends, they're not really like how we think of them now. She brought that distinct magic, that distinct style. She's a little underdeveloped because she just doesn't get that much time, but whatever time she's got, she uses it really well. Top of B.
Yeah, I was going to say bottom of A, but I'm also cool with top of B. I agree. She's not much of a character, but she's very awesome, and it's awesome seeing a cool Night Sister. I love that she can go toe-to-toe against Palpatine. The power level there is really amazing. Next, we have Nien Numb. Nien Numb is a solid character despite them kind of basically killing him off screen. I feel like I've fallen in love with Nien Numb a bit more now that Rise of the Resistance exists and I get to see him every time I go on that ride. But yeah, he's a B tier character in my opinion.
I like how he's kind of nervous but always heroic. That's the coolest part about him. He's always willing to put himself in situations that you're like, buddy, this might be a little too much for you, but he does it. Yeah, somewhere in B. I think I'm fine with that. Next up, we have Nute Gunray. He's fine. I do like his death scene quite a bit. I really do. So he's very effective, but he's like a very bottom B, top C character. I wish there was more to him.
I would say C. There's really not much to him at all. So next up, we have Obi-Wan Kenobi. As I've said about 5 times already in this list, he's my favorite Star Wars character of all time. So I will say top of S plus in the GOATs. And frankly, yeah, on paper, he's not as good of a character as Anakin or Luke. But he is my favorite. So I will say S plus.
I will say S plus, but not top of S plus. Behind Luke. I think that's the right place to put him because he's the type of character who, definitely appreciates that his students have grown past him. And next up, we have Padme Amidala. And, I really love her as a character. I think she's an A character. I think she's is very underrated, and she's only gotten better with time.
I would agree with you. I think she's an A character. Star Wars canon has done a lot to invest in Padme. On top of that, you have the Clone Wars appearances. Clone Wars 03 does a lot of cool things to Padme. Next, we have Captain Tarpals. I think that's a clean sweep for me with the Gungan characters. I got Jar Jar, of course, who belongs in the J++ tier. Just imagine there's an invisible tier up here, J++. It's Jar Jar, Captain Tarpals, Boss Noss, and then a couple of these other characters who we'll be getting to later. Captain Tarpals, honestly, he's an all right character. Like, he's a better character than Boss Noss because he has actual stories. He's in some comics and legends. He's in the Clone Wars. I'm fine with him at the top of C.
Yeah, I think C is a good place, but I do like that he is a little bit of a father figure to Jar Jar. Next up, we have Jacen Solo. And Jacen is, for a lot of Legends fans, like the ultimate character, right? And I tend to agree with a lot of their points. A lot of Legacy of the Force is not that great of a storytelling series. I do understand his tragedy quite a bit. I really do like what they've done. It's very, very well paced. I don't know if I'd consider him more than like S minus.
I definitely am going to say S. I think he minimum deserves S. But Jacen, who starts as a very strong character in his own right amongst the Skywalker lineage, the fact that you have him devolve into Caedus, I think it's a tragic story, and one that when you read all these books, it means a bit more and has a bit more weight maybe than just watching a few movies and seeing Anakin turn to the dark side. But on the flip side, it's like, it is just that story again. And especially Legacy of the Force was coming out. It came out a couple years after Revenge of the Sith. I mean, he is his own character. It's his own reasons, his own circumstances. It doesn't have to do with Darth Vader, right? But there is that echo, just like Ben Solo, that they were trying to accomplish by tying it into Vader. But not to just harken on that, because he has some amazing stuff in New Jedi Order. Young Jedi Knights is awesome, and that's a great series as well. He really stands out as his own unique character there. That is the one thing about him and Jaina, as opposed to Han and Leia and Luke, is they did a good job of, in Legends, you have a lot of repeat stories, but these types of characters, Jaina and Jacen, and Anakin for the most part, they have a great identity of their own. They're not carbon copies of their parents. They're not carbon copies of their parents' stories. And I think that's what makes the Solo kids in Legends still stand out today. So I would say he belongs in standard S. I love Tenel Ka. I think she's a really fascinating, tragic, interesting character, a really cool side of the Star Wars universe that hasn't really been brought back. I would throw her an S minus. Her story so neatly and tightly parallels and combines with Jacen's that they both make each other better.
I'll say A. I think a lot of her start is a little rough for me. What she's connected to, that's always been more interesting to me than her itself. And yes, I do like her stuff with Jacen. Don't get me wrong, but I would still say somewhere in A. I don't know if I'd say S minus. I think there's a lot more iconic characters there. Next up, we have Plo Koon. Great character. I mean, I think he was always a great design, but man, '08 Clone Wars did so much for him. I would say he's top of B character for me. I could almost push him to the bottom of A as well.
Plo is one of the standout Jedi from the Clone Wars. And when you really look at it, truly, he doesn't have that much material, but it's just so good what he is in that he really shines. I would say pretty high, honestly, maybe higher than Talzin, up there at the top of B. Next up, we have Poe Dameron, and this is another tough one. I think where Finn, personally, I was dead set on C because there was so much that was underwhelming about the character as opposed to his potential. I feel like we maxed out Poe's potential almost, but in a way, I never loved who Poe is, right? Like, he is that hotshot pilot. He is kind of quirky, spunky. He's the one who does use real English language swear words like ass or hell, but in a way that always felt a little off to me. And some of his Marvel jokes and stuff, there's just a weird line with Poe. Having said that, I do really like his comic book series, and I think almost on the written page he might work better than in the films. Because of the comic book series, I want to say he might be bottom of B, above Finn for me. But personally, I always look forward to Finn's appearances more. Like, I feel like I'm going to get more out of Finn than I ever got out of Poe.
I have a lot of the same sentiment. I wouldn't have minded if he was just done as a character, but he's not, right? He came back. He was supposed to die, but 8, I understand a lot of his story. I just wish that it was a little bit better handled between him and Holdo. But that comic series is really good. But then there's people who don't really like that he becomes like a spice smuggler in his early youth after being connected to two very notable rebel fighters, mid to bottom B. I think that comic series does a lot for him. Next up, we have Pong Krell, and I love this guy. He's never done anything wrong ever. It's so sad and pathetic of a character when you realize just how much of him is just a facade. In that sense, I think he has an argument for like somewhere in the bottom of A because he's so effective and his death is very iconic too. I think that's really good. But if it's B, I wouldn't mind that either.
Yeah, I recently rewatched Umbara, and it's still one of the greatest Clone Wars arcs of all time. As a villain, as a character, he is pretty one-dimensional, Pong Krell. I would have him below villains like Talzin or O3 Grievous. So in that scenario, I'd put him in B. But if they were, in a different tier, I would say he could be close to A in another world. Next up, we have Mara Jade Skywalker, one of my favorite Legends characters of all time. Bring her back. She needs to come back into canon. I love Mara Jade. I love everything she represents. I love what she brings out in Luke. I love her tragic story. There's really nothing I don't like about Mara Jade, maybe other than her Callista trilogy adventures with Lando. So I'm going to say she's minimum S. I would even venture S plus because she is so iconic, so effective. And outside of where Thrawn, I think Thrawn is very close to being S plus here soon. But if we're just comparing Legends to Legends, she's a far better character and more developed than Thrawn, where Thrawn might be iconic. Mara is very well developed.
I'll say top of S. I really do like her as a character. I don't think she really goes out like that. It's never sat with me 100% right that that's how she gets duped. Yeah, I'll still say S because a lot of her. She's one of the better parts of Bantam era for sure. Next up, we have Leia Organa, S plus, easily. I think she would have been an S maybe for me in Legends, but I really like what they've done with her in canon. I like that she's the most stalwart out of the big three.
Oh, she's absolutely S plus to me. I would put her above Han. I think Leia is a character that, while in the original trilogy, she's not as bombastic and a scene stealer as Han, while she doesn't have the main arc like Luke or Vader, Leia is that strong pillar of the original trilogy. And then one character that I feel like actually would have come out ahead in the sequel trilogy, where Leia in the sequel trilogy is not a negative, in my opinion. I think she's would have come out had Carrie Fisher not passed away for The Rise of Skywalker. She's a character that would have come out as a strong net positive. I think it would have been a really great, interesting take on her character. Very different than Legends, but I think a nice complementary piece. I love the character. She's in my probably top 5 favorite characters of all time for Star Wars. So absolutely S plus. Next up, we have Qi'ra, who has become a really fascinating character and still has room to become an even better character. Crimson Climb, good book. A lot of what Charles Soule has done in the comics has been really interesting with this character. I don't know if I can quite put her in A yet, but she has worked her way towards the very top of B.
Yeah, I would also say top of B. I liked a lot of what we got out of War of the Bounty Hunters for her. Powerful in her own way. She's a great foil for Leia as well, especially during that time period. Next up, we got Qui-Gon Jinn. Love the guy. I really do love the guy. I think the stories that we got in Legends, like Jedi Apprentice, it's maybe not as rich as some of the stuff we've gotten in canon, but I feel like everything has really understood him. Canon just doubled down on just how wise and spiritual he is. I'll give him S minus.
He's one of the most important characters in the history of Star Wars, but like you said, it's hard to bump him up into that straight S tier out of the appearances we have now. Legends has given him the quantity. He has way more stories in Legends, and a lot of them are very good. Jedi Apprentice, underrated. Canon has given him very few stories, but they've all been top tier canon stories. I think he's right around the Dooku level. Next, we have R2-D2. R2 is a lot of people's favorite droid, one of the heroes of Star Wars, saving all the characters time after time. Easy S tier, in my opinion.
You know how there's always that dude who's just super cool and intimidating, but then you get to know him, you're like, oh man, he's a really awesome guy as well. That's R2. Next, we have Rey, but she is Rey Skywalker. She's taken the name. She's gone a force acceptance. As a character, she's hard to judge because I think The Force Awakens is a great start for her. I think The Last Jedi is incredible for her. I don't think The Rise of Skywalker is that great for her in a lot of ways because it's another retcon of sorts. But we also don't know anything about her. Like, yeah, there's a Forces of Destiny, there's some books and comics here and there. I think she could have a really unique journey. I really do think she can because she'll always have by blood someone who is a Skywalker connected to her. She has this incredible force phenomenon. You can say she's a little overpowered. I'm not going to say that she's not, but I think there's enough of the story that supports it. She's hard, and I think the fairest thing to do is just put her in B, just dead middle B. I think that's where she is.
I've been dreading this one since we started rolling. I have no idea where to put Rey. She is a mess, just like the story around her. Every movie she changed, and not necessarily as like a growth for her character. It's just like they were changing exactly what they wanted to do with her. The Last Jedi, I think, is her best movie, her best story, because it felt like they picked a path. I personally didn't start second guessing how much I liked Rey until The Rise of Skywalker, when they went back on the Palpatine thing, and Rey has endless potential. There's so much potential, and by making her a Palpatine, even though I don't like that move, it adds even more potential to her story for what you could do with her in the future. That she's almost impossible to rate. Like, it's almost like we need a tier to just called Rey. It has like it's like TBD for the future. But I would agree with you. I was gonna lean towards kind of bottom of B because that would technically be like middle, like dead center. Next up, we have Rio Durant, who, on a different note, is very much so the character that he is in Solo Star Wars Story. Very fun character, honestly. I love what Jon Favreau did with Rio Durant. He's such a fun character, such a unique species. I'd put him in B.
Yeah, I'd put him like a little bit like near Nien Numb before Tuna. I think that's a good spot for him. Next up, we have Rose. I'm not the biggest fan of Rose. I think she's just a stand-in for learning a lot of messages that Finn already should have kind of known. I do not agree with the kiss in The Last Jedi. I thought that was very unnecessary. Hate that she got sidelined to study Star Destroyer schematics, and I don't know. I don't really like her that much. I would say C.
I feel like people have backed off of Rose a bit over the years. Like, the initial hate for The Last Jedi was so bad that it could only get better. But Rose, I feel like she's relatively inoffensive as a character. What doesn't work for Rose, in my opinion, is she has a lot of the worst lines and worst moments in The Last Jedi. Like the ones that you watch and go, oh. Well, you had Rey and Rose. I got Sabine Wren, who is also kind of going under her own controversy right now, but before was absolutely beloved. And if we're going off of Rebels, like, I think she's easy A, and I still think her journey in Ahsoka leaves her in that A tier, because whether you want to be upset about her getting force powers or not, Ahsoka starts the groundwork that's justifiable enough for her being able to achieve it. It feels a little frustrating for me as a fan of Rebels personally, because I felt like we went through this entire arc where we made her cool and independent without force powers. We didn't need to give her them.
Yeah, I'd put her around Chopper, maybe ahead of him or just below him. I think that's a good spot for her. If you're really hating that she all of a sudden has the Force, she's no different from EU characters. It's just we've seen her a lot longer and a lot more material. So we have Salacious B Crumb as our next character. I mean, I like the guy, but all he does is chew through Jabba's tail and get electrocuted and die. Like, that's about it. So I'll say somewhere in C.
Gotta be towards the top. Like, I really want to start our J tier. We're moving on to Max Rebo next, and obviously somebody who also deserves to be in J++, but is gonna end up in B tier next to Djarin.
I love the boy. Don't get me wrong. Max was one of those simple designs that just feels so cute and lovable. I want to give the guy a hug. Incredible musician. We already know that. He's a bottom of B. Next, we go with one of Liam's favorites, Droopy McCool. I'm not really sure where the Mick is. I guess he might be Scottish. No, no. We're gonna say C.
He plays the Chidalco flute though, and like, he's really good at it. So S plus.
C plus. How about that? How about that?
Oh, okay. That's fair. Split the middle. Well, I guess I have to go to one of the boring characters and talk about Satine Kryze. Satine Kryze, she's, loves Obi-Wan, as we all do. I wish we got more of her. I feel like if we do some prequel stuff, some like early, before, like when she went on her first mission with Obi-Wan, that type of stuff, if we explore that one day, She could climb into A. I think right now she's a top of B.
Yeah, I'd like to see a lot more of her family life. I mean, it's very strange to me that Bo-Katan talked about her father, but not her sister. To make Obi-Wan consider leading the Order, you got to be special, and she is. So I'd give her like an A. Next up, we have Ben Quadranos, which I can say C, but I think he's really funny in the scenes that he has, so I'll say bottom of B.
Oh, okay. I'll take it. Ben Quadraneros, I mean, he's awesome. He got a bad shake in the Boon to Eat Classic. His pod not even starting, blowing up on the starting line. It's too bad. I'm sure there was foul play there, with all the gambling and that stuff. And he really didn't deserve it. He probably would have won. Some theorize, myself included, and I'm not just making this up right off the spot right now. Maybe Qui-Gon destroyed his pod with the Force because Anakin wouldn't have won if Ben Quadraneros raced. So yeah, that's why he's B.
We'll say heresy for now, but sure, maybe we can look into that.
Next up is Kidster, who, if you haven't been reading the Darth Vader comic books or didn't read the old issues that he was in, Kidster is still around. He's still alive and kicking at the time between The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. And he's fun and a good friend to Anakin, and he says wizard, C tier.
It's unfortunate. I like his character, but he is really just there as like a reminder for Anakin of his past at this point. Next up, we have Savage Opress, and one of the best characters to come out of the Clone Wars. He is so dramatically independent at the start, and he's got a tragic story of his own, but his death is also really significant to Maul, and like the clearest example that Maul will never have anything he wants in life. I'd say B, somewhere up in the upper B. I think he does get the short end of the stick after he meets with Maul, unfortunately.
Upper B, though, very much so upper B. Next, we have Shmi Skywalker, who I've always felt gets a little underserved. She's a great character, and I think she promotes Anakin, pushes him, propels him is the word I'm looking for. She propels Anakin into his journey and to basically every decision that he makes up until becoming Darth Vader. I would say Shmi is an upper B as well.
I would say somewhere around middle B, but again, I really do like her character. She's always clicked for me. Plagueis. I think Liam, you could speak a little bit more on him. I would say right now he's like an S- for me.
Yeah, I was torn between S- and A for Plagueis. Like you're saying, he is really limited to just one single appearance. I mean, he does have appearance in Maul Lockdown. That book is incredible. He is an incredible character in it. Do we promote somebody to S- for just being incredible in one thing? We have Qui-Gon in there. We have Tarkin in there. Like a lot of Cad Bane, a lot of these characters, you can have one thing where you're truly so universe defining that I think you can creep up in the S tier. You basically go through the entirety of his Sith life. Next up, we have Snoke. There's a lot more to Snoke to learn. As of now, I got to put him in C, kind of in the same reason that Phasma's there.
I like to see just how much he affects the First Order, just how much he affects the New Republic, and how he manages to survive into becoming the Supreme Leader. But yeah, right now he's a lot of untapped potential. Next, we have Tobias Beckett. An interesting character in terms of serving a lesson for Han. I would just say C.
Yeah, I want to say B, but I'm cool with C. Just Solo, a lot of things about Solo were underwhelming. As big of an actor as Woody Harrelson is, and as grandiose as his performances usually are, I never think about Tobias Beckett. Next up, we have Val, who dies in the first act of Solo, a Star Wars story. Val is a C tier. I'd be okay with D as well, but somewhere in the mid to bottom of C.
I honestly want to say D. I think she's such a waste of a character in time. Next up, we have Watto. A little bit of a caricature, especially in episode 1. Somewhere near top of C.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. Next, we have Wicket W. Warwick. Wicket is the best Ewok, and he actually has some character if you include Legends, because you get the Ewoks show and, unfortunately, the Ewoks movies. B tier?
I think if Wicket was just a singular character in Return of the Jedi, people would love him a lot more. That the fact that he's reflective of all the Ewoks and how crazy they are, sometimes people don't get the believability of it. I would say somewhere near bottom of B for sure. Next up, we have Captain Fordo, who is the coolest clone until the Clone Wars, and the fact that he's still up there says a lot. I wish we could have seen him in the Clone Wars to just have at least one super cool scene and then just leave him be. But what we get in O3 Clone Wars is so important for establishing how awesome and skilled the clone troopers are, that I would say he's a top of B for me, for sure.
Yeah, I almost want to bump him up to A minus because he's so iconic, and it goes in that vein of the 03 Clone Wars, right? Like I was talking about with Grievous, where there's not much time for the side characters to really do anything. So when they stand out, it's because they're cool. Anakin Solo is an interesting one to track here because a lot of his development are done in kids' books. You have him in junior novels with the Junior Jedi Knights, and then you have Young Jedi Knights where he makes appearances, and then you finally get to see him transition into something with some adult material in New Jedi Order. His death is important. It's like it drives a lot of what the further story is, and I think what they do with they kill him out of obligation because George Lucas wanted him dead. It's a powerful story, and what he does actually contributes a lot to the furthering of the EU. I think Anakin as that symbol, he deserves to be at least in that. I would say at worst top of A, should be in the S minus.
I was gonna say S minus. I really do like his story. He was supposed to be greater than even Anakin, right? He was gonna be his namesake. To cut his potential short by doing the most, important thing in his life, the most sacrificial play, it works for me. And then the waves and ripples that it has on his siblings, on the rest of the galaxy, on the course of the galaxy, I think it's really important. Next up, we have Yoda, and I love Yoda a lot. I think he's done a lot more development in canon than I ever expected him to. S minus or top of A, it's one of those.
I think he has to go in the S tier somewhere. Personally, would have said in the S tier, the legendary tier. I think he is one of those characters like Palpatine that elevates to the point where you don't need every facet of his character. He is who he is. He serves his role flawlessly. And he is so iconic and important to the story of Star Wars that he is in that upper echelon. But I do think Yoda serves a role that's so much more than it appears on paper. He is like so important to the fabric of Star Wars. And in that way, I think he does belong up there. Next up, we have Jaina Solo. Jaina is the only of the Solo children to live all the way through the EU. I think Jaina is a really fascinating and great character as well. I would put her in the S tier. Oh, it's tough comparing the two of them. I think Jacen, the ebbs and flows in Jacen's story, what he has to do with, what he has to contend with, and what he has to deal with as a person, I think edge him out above Jaina, but I would put her right next to him. Like, it is very tight, and I think she is arguably one of the best, if not the best, written female character in the entire EU.
She's right next to Jacen. She is a little bit more even in her story path. I think that's why, even if her highs are not the same highs as Jacen, they are very close, but she never has the same lows as him per se. Zero the Hutt, man. This is like an F tier character. I really do not like Zero.
No argument. Zero is awful. Next, we have Zori Bliss. Zori Bliss, another kind of random extraneous character introduced in The Rise of Skywalker to create another plot line. D or C?
I think she's D. Not that because I don't like her. I think she's actually pretty fun. Kerry Russell's a great actress. Next up, we have Agent Kallus. Fascinating Imperial character turned Rebel Alliance hero. I would say he's somewhere in the middle of B, though. I feel like he did get maxed out at some point in Rebels.
I'd say he's upper B. Like, I think he and Zeb, their story intertwines, like I mentioned earlier. I think they belong right next to each other. Next, we have Bo-Katan Kryze, great in Clone Wars, great in Rebels, and had a great start to live action. Shortchanged a little bit with how much emphasis should have been put on an incredibly important redemption arc for her in The Mandalorian Season 3. However, I think now that we've cut through a lot of the weeds of getting her back as the Mandalore, now we have a time to truly cement what it means to have lived under the reign of a Bo-Katan Kryze as the Mandalore. She's A minus B plus for me now after Mando Season 3, which I do think does a little disservice to her character.
I say A, just the very bottom of A, because I think how the Darksaber plays a role in her life, and then the execution of that in Mando Season 3 is really not good. Next up, we have Jorus Sabayat, the clone of Jedi Master Jorus Sabayat. I think he's a little bit overhyped at times. He just gets very crazy and maniacal immediately in Dark Force Rising. Whereas I thought he had some level of like intrigue and unknown about like is he really mad or not in Heir to the Empire. But he's iconic, so I can't say that he's not up there. So I would say A.
I love this character. I love what he represents. I love what he does in the story. And I also love Talon Card. Talon Card is Hondo, but competent and a lot more suave. I think he's an A as well.
Yeah, I really like Talon Card quite a bit. I like how resourceful he is, especially once his whole operations are destroyed. Next up, we have Gilad Pelion. Not necessarily like an Imperial that I say is like super cool or I want to follow, because there's a lot of interesting Bantam era. What's compelling about him is that he's just a good dude, but he learns from everybody. That he's a good learner. Even though he's in awe of Thrawn, he eventually learns from his flaws.
Absolutely. I think he's an A tier. I think Pelion is maybe the single best Imperial we've gotten. Next, we have Cal Kestis. Cal Kestis has had a really great story so far through the 2 Jedi games. A character that I think is reminiscent of a lot of things we've seen in the past, but especially in Survivor, takes a story that's a bit familiar and turns it into something that I think carved out a path for Cal that will have its own unique consequences and a unique place in Star Wars history. I think Cal's already an A character.
The story carries Cal a lot more in Fallen Order. He's not terribly interesting himself. Survivor is when he really becomes his own character, and a lot of his relationships from the first game are really solidified. Next, we have BD1. I love this guy. He's a little dog. He's fun. I bought him a B, top of C. He's very useful.
I'd put him in B. I think he's a better droid than BB-8. Next, we have Seer Junda. Seer's a tough one to rank. I think a lot of her story on paper has potential for A, bottom of A, and I would be okay with that. I was going to say very top of B.
I agree. Near top of B as well. It's her failure and then the redemption of her failure, and accepting she won't totally undo what she's done, but she can continue her life. Grease is a fun character, man. He's just a loyal dude, even though he's super nervous all the time. But yeah, top of B.
Grease has grown on me. I think he was a character that started out, as your kind of comedic side character with some heart in Fallen Order, to having actually been maybe the standout of Battle Scars, and then having a great role in a more subdued way, but more fatherly way in Survivor. Yeah, I would raise him towards the top of B as well. And I think this might be the point in the video. We have these once in a while when we go on with these large tier lists where maybe we should bump some of these up to A, because there are a lot that are in B, and I feel like there's a dramatic difference between a lot of these Bs and the rest of B.
Oh, I would say we can take the top 3, bump them up to A.
I would say even Grievous, and I'm even on the border for Seer, Fordo, Grogu, Jabba, Savage. Like, I think Savage to me is the dead last one. I don't think I can put Pong Krell in A. Next, we have Bode, a character who's really interesting. I think has a great story. There's a little bit of me that wanted more Bode, especially post-turn. I don't want to keep saying B, but he's a B.
Yeah, I mean, I really do like his turn. I just wish we had more time with his turn and not like picking up the pieces quite literally. I want to say he's ahead of Kiadi, Mundi, and Aura Singh. Next up, we have Trilla Sanduri, the second sister. Fascinating villain. She really did elevate that story. I would say it's a little tragic at the end. I wish we got a little bit more out of her, but maybe top of B.
I would say top of B as well. I think Trill is a better villain than Bode. Next, we have Marin. Marin has been a bit of a subject of controversy after Battle Scars. I think the 2 games, though, are strong enough to bring her character towards the top. Survivor's so good for her. I think I gotta say A- at least.
Yeah, I was gonna say bottom of A. I think if Battle Scars was a lot better, I would have really liked it. But she's so good in Survivor. All right, next up we have Dagan Gera, the High Republic antagonist of Jedi Survivor. I'm a little underwhelmed by him. I think he's really good, but the boss fights were not as good as I was hoping. I want to know a little bit more about his backstory. Somewhere in upper B.
I would say, yeah, middle B. Memorable villain, but one that needs a lot more to him. Next is Iden Versio. Pretty strong character for the very short Battlefront 2 campaign. We do get her life mostly in chapters. I, again, like more depth to it. B tier character.
Yeah, I would put her somewhere around the B tier. My only issue with her is that her turn is too quick. Next up is Pre Vizsla. I think he has a great introduction with the Darksaber. Very important to Mandalorian lore. Top of B, maybe even bottom of A.
I was going to say bottom of A. Pre Vizsla is a character that's really stood out, I guess, in the new age of what Clone Wars '08 did for Mandalorians. He was the first one to really stand out. Obviously, the forebearer of the Darksaber, the one that brings it into Star Wars. Next, we have the Martez sisters, and the Martez sisters arc is everybody's least favorite of season 7. It's a mediocre arc, and even though they come back in a bit better way in the Bad Batch, I still don't really love them or their stories. Trace for me honestly borders F. Rafa, C, or D.
Yeah, I'd say D is a good place to put them. They were better in the Bad Batch, so I hope if they do come back, they continue to improve every time we see them. Next up, we have Corran Horn. I love him. I like Corellians, man, and a Corellian Jedi who's also very Corellian, but not very Corellian. I don't know. There's just something about him that was just special for me. Top of B, bottom of A.
Oh, I was going to put him way higher. I was going to put him S minus. I think Corran Horn's one of the best Legends characters out there that doesn't have a Skywalker or Solo name. I think, especially in terms of Jedi who join Luke's Academy, and more specifically, adult Jedi who randomly discover they have Force powers who join Luke's Academy. Corran is easily the most fleshed out. He has a lot of great character. He has great family dynamics, and he has a really interesting past. And his journey towards gaining his powers, while not necessarily the typical type of Force ability trial that most people go through, it's at least a fascinating build to really push him in a direction where he might have latent Force sensitivity develop and show.
I like him a lot, so I'll let you decide that.
Next up, we got Saw Gerrera. I do actually really love the young version of Saw Gerrera that we're seeing in Bad Batch and we saw in Clone Wars. Want more of him for sure to see how he turns into this wacky version that Forrest Whitaker plays in Rogue One. B tier though as of now.
Interesting. I was going to put him at bottom of A, but I can go for top of B because I really do like his Rebels characterization. I think that shows a lot of the signs and how much more of a broken man he is at that point. Next up is the Grand Inquisitor. Super great villain for the Rebels. I think he really carries that first season, and I've liked how he's been used in supplementary material. I think if there was more to him, and if Obi-Wan Kenobi had a lot more of him as a central role, maybe in place of Reva, maybe I would have said, like, okay, easy, bottom of A, because he's really good in that first season of Rebels. But because of that, I think he's just upper B, mid B.
I'd say he's upper B. I think his appearances are standout, but there's not as much to the character yet. The Darth Vader, Dark Lord of the Sith stuff almost elevates him a little higher for me. I do like a lot of the stuff that's posthumously done with him when it's revealed that he was a former Temple Guard. Next up, we have Darth Bane and Darth Zana, the Rule of Two. I love these characters. As a huge fan of the Bane trilogy, both of these characters are excellent. Zana gets slept on. She's such a great character and one of my favorite Sith, honestly, in the entirety of the EU. And Bane is Bane. Everybody knows Bane. Everybody loves Bane. I would say for me, Bane would be S tier, and Zana I would put an S minus.
I agree with that. I wish there was like another book of just Zana. Next up is Cade Skywalker. This is a dude who is like a Skywalker on drugs, essentially, who wears the Vader pants. He's a bit of a messy character. He's always pushing against his legacy and his past, which I do like. I do like a little bit more of it where he is by the end of the series, where he just chooses his own path with his friends. But he doesn't get that interesting after a while. He remains a little stagnant for me. So I would say top of B, bottom of A.
I was going to say bottom of A or middle A. I love Legacy. I really enjoyed reading it, and I think he's different. It's edgy, but he has a cool arc that you enjoy following throughout. You are rooting for him. And that takes us to Darth Krayt or Asherad Het. Including the Asherad Het stuff, I gotta go S minus at least for Krayt. Krayt is one of those fascinating characters that just has so much to him. And it's a character that continuously is built on.
I'm not going to disagree on the placement. I've never truly loved him, but I think that's kind of the point. Next up is Darth Talon. This is like all the worst parts about like female Twi'leks. I don't care about her as a character. I don't think she really even has character. She's just there to be a pinup for a lot of people. C tier, honestly. She's cool when she fights. I'll give her that.
I understand all those criticisms. I was going to say B tier, bottom of B tier. She isn't much of a character, but she does have like a relatively significant role in Legacy compared to a lot of other Legacy characters like her. Flirtatious relationships with Cade or with Krayt. Next we have Admiral Akbar. Admiral Akbar you would think would be that middle bottom B type of character based on his appearance in the movie. Iconic, but just one good line. I do hate the way he dies in The Last Jedi, I truly do. But Legends here is what's bringing me to say, I'd say A- for Admiral Akbar.
Yeah, I mean, I fully agree on those points. I just hope that he gets to play a little more of a political role moving forward. He just was there. Next up, we have Ben Skywalker. He gets screwed by the fact that Legends EU is ending, right? He has some moments in Legacy of the Force, but not too much. I do like his relationship with Komari Vosa, the will they, won't they sort of thing. I think he could have grown into something more, but as he is right now, he's like a B.
I want to say A just purely for the fact that he's a Skywalker. And he did absolutely get screwed because he started down a path towards interesting storytelling that really barely got started. I wouldn't argue with B, especially towards the top. Next up, we have Kyle Katarn, arguably the best video game character in Star Wars, one of the top video game protagonists. Kyle is awesome, and I love what they did with him in the entire Jedi Knight series, but I also love what they did with him in the EU post the Jedi Knight series. I'd say Kyle's at least an S- around that Corran Horn level.
I really do like Kyle, and the legacy that he leaves behind with his apprentices is pretty important. I wish that was a little bit more explored. Next up, we have Bail Organa, really important figure in galactic history, especially in canon. I really like how important he is to creating the rebel cells, and I'd say A.
I would say A as well. I think Bail Organa, Canon's done a lot with adding more Jimmy Smits that's made him awesome, but he was already awesome before that. Next up, we have Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru. Both of them are strong characters. Owen is obviously a much stronger character, been given a lot more due. I did like the way Beru defended her family at the end of Obi-Wan Kenobi. I thought that was an impressive use of Beru, maybe the most expansive use of Beru we've seen. I think Beru is firmly a mid to bottom B. Owen, though, is where I'm torn because Owen has barely any time. However, I think he's incredibly important. Realistically, top of B, but I'd be happy to flirt with bottom of A for Owen.
I think it's bottom of B for Beru and top of B for Owen. By the end, Owen becomes a guy telling Luke, yeah, I gotta just stay on the farm for another season, right? And next up, we got Cobb Vanth, a character introduced in the Aftermath trilogy through interludes, which were pretty awesome. Timothy Olyphant's awesome. He plays a lot of Western characters, and I think he brings a lot here. He's like a top of B for me.
Yeah, I'd say mid B for me. Not much to him in terms of character, but he does have that cool factor. Let's talk about this first set from KOTOR 1. All of these are really strong characters. Let's start with Revan. On paper, Revan, easy S tier. Could even border S plus at times, but Revan is what you make him. Bastila would approach that S minus. I think her arc across the entirety of the first KOTOR game is arguably the best arc in the entire game. And then HK's gotta at least be A. I love him. He's so fun. Canderous as well. I'd put in A, and Karth I'd put in B.
I think I like all those. I would say Revan, because the book S minus, Malik top of A. I would say Basila's top of A. I don't think she's S minus. I fully agree about Canderous and HK. Karth's annoying, but his heart's in the right place. He's just very annoying, so he's a B.
We drop Revan. I really feel like he should be an S for how iconic he is. Like,
sure. Next up, we have the KOTOR 2 Triumvirate, the Sith Triumvirate. They all look really cool, but I think it's really Traya that's the show stealer. Nihilus is a lot of talk, all right? He's super powerful lore-wise, but not really caring about him in the game. And then even Sion, I think Sion, they just didn't do enough with him. He's such a small role compared to the other two. I would put Traya as an easy S. I'd put Nihilus and Sion as A tier. I think Rule of Cool still really helps them both out.
I'd put Traya S minus, where Nihilus and Sion rely more on power. I do think Nihilus is maybe the most interesting concept, but the least interesting character. He's the one who has the least development, but Sion at least has actually like some emotion tied to him. Like he can't die, and the exile convinces him to die. With Mitra Surik convinces him to die. I would put Sion in A. Nihilus might be B.
I'm fine with bumping down Nihilus.
So next up we have Mitra Surik, the main character of KOTOR 2. And similar to Revan, this is an excellent character. And I feel, honestly, in some ways, almost as fascinating as Revan. I think we know more about Revan, and that makes him stronger, but I'd still argue Mitra for sure in that S minus. I do think the Revan book screws up Mitra more than it screws up Revan.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think they handle her characterization that well in the book, but she still had potential if they landed the book ending. Next up, we have Darth Malgus from the Old Republic. There's a lot to sit there, but this is the first one we get introduced through cinematics, and he's still being updated with story arcs, and he has a very emotional core too, but I would say maybe A.
I'd say A as well. Deceived is an interesting story, but I was honestly a little underwhelmed with Deceived. I wanted a bit more from him and a bit more from the story. As for his Old Republic story, I think it's all strong. Next up is Dengar. Dengar, interesting in the comics. Some solid story in canon as well. Decent in Clone Wars. Very bottom of B or top of C.
Top of C. If Rotgar is his final evolution, I would actually put him down to a D because that sucks. Next, we have Dexter Jetster. I love this man. He gives the best hugs. We already knew this. He gets great food. I do like how Canon's been fleshing out his relationship with Obi-Wan. Yeah, I'd say somewhere mid B.
I agree. I love Dexter Jetster, and his Jawa juice, I'm sure, is really good. Next up, we have the Ewoks characters. We have Mace and Sindel. Let's just get out of the way right now. Mace is one of the worst characters ever. He's so annoying. I hate Mace. Sindel is better. I'd still put her in C. Mace, absolutely F.
I think the best part about Mace is that he dies in the second movie immediately. Next up, we have Poggle the Lesser. Kind of gets punked quite a bit in the Clone Wars, unfortunately. A low B for me.
I like Poggle. Like, amongst the Separatist leaders, Poggle's one of my favorites. Also has a big significance in helping to build the Death Star. So next we have Quinlan Voss, and now that we're including Legends, Quinlan jumps from maybe being a high B, low A character from canon to now I think being a solid at least S minus, close to S.
Yeah, I say S minus. Some of his Republic stuff is just a little too edgy. Wat Tambor of the Techno Union. I love his design. I love how he's got to always adjust his voice. I don't know. He's just one of those dudes to me. I know he has a lot in Legends. Bottom B, top C.
I'd put him in B too. I think he's one of those Separatist leaders who's actually really scary. Next up, we have Wedge Antilles. I love Wedge. I'm a big fan of the X-Wing books. Wedge is an excellent character, especially in the EU. I would put him in S minus as well.
I'd say behind Tarkin. I don't know. I'm considering canon. I think canon does do him a bit of a disservice, even if I do like a little bit more of his origin, a bit more in canon.
Like, I feel like Tarkin has very, very little development in Legends. And even though it's great in canon, what he does have, Wedge has some good canon development and then a ton of Legends development.
I mean, we can put him ahead of Kyle then. Next up, we have Fennec Shand. Story's not really there yet. I think if Book of Boba Fett continues her and adds a little bit more weight to her, it may be connecting her to why she's with Boba, ultimately, or why Boba seeks her out. If there's like a relationship between those three, I think that'd be really cool. Squarely in the middle of B.
I think she has more to offer. She's a pretty one-note basic bounty hunter at this point, so I'd say pretty mid to bottom B. Next up is the Frog Lady. A fun episode. I would put her in C.
C. Next up is Miggs Mayfield. I don't know why it works, and it works because of his scene. I want him to return. I'd say it's like upper B.
I would too, middle upper B. I think around the Grief Karga level. Next up is Moff Gideon, a character who honestly is a bit disappointing. I enjoyed this character quite a bit in his brief appearance in season 1. I enjoyed him in season 2 for what he was. His season 3 appearances honestly left a lot to be desired, in my opinion. But as of now, I got to put him more towards the middle of B.
Yeah, I think he was ready to jump into A. And next up, we have Pelimoto, a character that I thought I'd get annoyed by more and more I see her, but I'm really happy that she's sticking around. Lower B, but surprisingly there.
I really wasn't a big fan of this character at first. She definitely has grown on me enough to where I would say that's fine with B. Next up is Shock T. Shock T definitely has more growth in Legends than we've seen in canon. Some for better, some for worse. I think particularly her Clone Wars 03 stuff is excellent. I'd put her in that mid B around the Ki-Adi-Mundi Aayla Secura level.
Yeah, I think she's on the same par of all those Jedi Masters. Like, yeah, she's there. The Bendu, more of a concept than a real character, but that's also kind of the point. Solidly lower B.
Mid to upper B. Like, I think he's a character that really maximizes on his moments. Next, we got Captain Panaka. I like this character. There's still just not very much of him. C.
I do like that he has a sort of dignified end in Princess of Alderaan. I'd say top of C. Next up, we have the Bad Batch. Wrecker, I think he's the easiest one to pick out. He's a C for me. Tech is super developed in season 2. Crosshair and Hunter, I think, are good parallels in terms of development. Those are both really strong characters. I'd also say those are like upper B. Yeah, Tech, middle B, Wrecker, C. Omega, I'm really liking where they're going, especially since the end of season 2. I still think she's more of a mid B character, but I think by the end of the run, she'll be closer to top of B. Sid's a D.
I have a similar take on most of them. I would agree with Sid and D. I was going to say C, but as for the rest, I'm similar on some, although I think Wrecker is definitely a B. I don't think any of the Bad Batch dropped to C. I think even though he has not much character amongst the rest of the B characters, like I think he's better character than Peru or BB-8. Hunter and Tech, I would put in the upper B. Crosshair would be the one I'd put up an A, and I think he's gonna even broach maybe S minus by the end of the show. Omega would be upper B, but I'd probably have her ahead of Wrecker, but behind Tech and Hunter.
I agree with those. I like that.
Next up, we got two of the best characters from the Aphra comics, Dr. Aphra and Black Chrysanthemum. I love both of these characters. Aphra is definitely a standout, obviously being the most iconic comic book character from Star Wars canon. Chrysanthemum also being the first big iconic comic book character from canon to get that transition over into live action, which was also very cool. I'd say Chrysanthemum is top of B. Aphra would be low A for me.
It's just incredible that a comic exclusive character ended up having 2 really strong runs, and people are excited for her to come back for a third one. Chrysanthemum, I do like his scenes in Book of Boba Fett. They're funny or they're crazy cool. It's there's no in between for me. I'd say bottom of A for Aphra, Chrysanthemum, upper B. Next up, we have Reva, Tala, we have Haji, we have Roken. They're not the greatest characters. I'm a little bit more of a defender of Reva than most people. There's so much more for her. She just was in a show that wasn't very Inquisitor friendly. Tala's pretty fine, but nothing I care about too much. Bottom of B for her. Top of B for Reva. Haji's a C. Roken's a C as well.
I was going to say C for all 4 of them. I think Reva's a mess of writing. I think on concept, she could be interesting. She just needs way more. Tala, again, yeah, not much of a memorable character, although it does have a good depth. Haji, I actually like quite a bit. I think he's fun for what the show is, and Roken is the most forgettable.
I'll push for Reva to be bottom of B. I still think if you're going to say messy, there's definitely weird characters that don't have anything, and she still has substance to her.
I'm okay compromising on that. I do truly think she's very poorly written.
I'm just saying that I think she's better than Panaka and Droopy McCool.
Maybe, in some eyes. Next up, we got the Force Unleashed characters. Solid cast of characters. I think the characters are kind of what carry the Force Unleashed. Starkiller's a really good character. I'd still put him at the top of B. Rom Koda as well. I think Rom is absolutely fascinating. Juno, middle to bottom of B, and Proxy, same. I think they're all B tier characters.
I will say Starkiller is not one of my favorites, but I understand. I'd say upper B. Rom Koda, I'd say is upper B, but I feel like he's definitely mishandled in the second game. Juno is like a bottom B. I do like Proxy a lot. I'd actually say Proxy is solidly in the middle of B. Next, we have Kip Duron of Jedi Academy infamy, but ultimately a really well-rounded and deeply troubled, but honest to God, trying his best Jedi, right? I really like his relationship training-wise with Jaina. He is headstrong. He is aggressive. He's got darker tendencies, but he's always servant to the light by the end of the day. I just think that his beginning, as iconic as it is, it's so much of a mistake for him to have the Sun Crusher and top of A, bottom S minus.
I'd say in A. He's redeemed quite well for being a mass murderer. Next, we got 4 of the big players from the High Republic, starting with Marchion Ro, who has become one of my favorite villains in Star Wars. I'd say easy A for Marchion. Then you have Avar, Elzar, and Stellan, all excellent characters as well, and get their own variety of stories. Elzar, I think, is the best out of the 3. I'd put him in A. Avar is that bubble A B for me, as well as Stellan. I think we're going to continue to get more and more Avar, and it's going to be pushing her up into that upper echelon of High Republic characters. Honestly, would be happy with all three of them in A.
I agree with that. Avar, I think she is lower A, and Stellan's also lower A, but his sacrifice is so good, and he's really great with Lena So at the Republic Fair and Valo. Elzar, man, he's grown a lot on me. I think he was cool, but now he's got such turmoil and depth, but he's fighting so hard to be good that I really like it. Tales of the Jedi, the comics, not the TV show. Ulick is one of my favorites of all time. He is Anakin of the Tales of the Jedi era, but he has a really beautiful but tragic redemption at the very end. I would put him low A. Nomi, she's super powerful. She's got battle meditation. She strips away Ulick's force ability, which is really cool. I say they're both firmly mid A then. Exar Kun, he's a tough one because I like him a lot in what we get from the Jedi Academy series. Tales of the Jedi, I'm a little hit or miss. I think he's a little bit bland there, but I do like his whole Masasi Temple sacrifice. I wouldn't mind putting them all together. I think they're all quite equal quality-wise.
Ulick is the best of the characters. It was 90s comic books, so the writing isn't that great or nuanced for all of them, but the story is there. I do actually think, despite Nomi being arguably the most powerful of the three, she's the least developed in the series. So I'd say she's more towards the bottom. I think the other two are higher up. Exar Kun, for what he does for Star Wars, like his importance, his legacy on Star Wars is incredible. I think he belongs in that middle to lower A, and then I'd put Nomi towards the bottom of it. Next up, we have the characters from Andor, but we'll start with the two bigger characters here, and that is Mon Mothma and Luthen Rael. Both are excellent characters, and I would say both belong in the A tier. Even in one season of a show, Luthen Rael has really cemented himself as one of the most complex and interesting Star Wars characters we've seen. And then Mon Mothma was already A tier, but what is given to her in Andor also elevates her.
I mean, Luthen Rael probably has arguably the greatest monologue of Star Wars history. It's that good. Yeah, I would say she's ahead of HK. Okay, we're going to go through the rest of the Andor crew. Bix, I wish there was more to her. I think she has a great start, but then she does disappear, but then she has that horrifying end. Potential alone, I'll say mid B. Cyril is really great. I'd say bottom of A. Dedra, I think, is maybe bottom A. Kino Loy, that's iconic. Andy Serkis bodied that role. The arc there is so good. I'd say top of B or bottom of A. Vel and Syntha, firmly in the middle of B. Middle B for Skeen as well. It's good, but it is mostly just scene stealing. Terramin, I don't really care about. He's bottom of B. Nemec, I think, is also mid B, upper B, just because of the importance to Cassian as a character.
I will say I agree on a lot of it. Mid B for Bix. Cyril and Dedra, upper B. Kino Loy, upper B. Vel and the middle lower B, and then I think bottom of B, mid to bottom of B.
Okay, yeah, I can go with that.
Okay, we're doing three more Mandalorian characters here, starting with Dr. Pershing, then going to Paz Vizsla, and then the Armorer. Pershing, interesting. I'd say he's a very bottom of B. Paz, middle to bottom of B. I like how he goes out. The Armorer, I would say middle, upper B.
I agree with all the placements. I think Pershing, we're not done with him. Paz, incredible end. I love the fight against the Praetorian Guards. The Armorer, I'm a little mixed on, but because I was hoping for a little bit more of her backstory instead of just being there. We end our very long tier list here with the standout Ahsoka characters. Baylan's awesome. Rest in peace to Ray Stevenson. I don't know how you're going to follow up, but Shin Hati, she's tagging along, right? There's a lot of tension with her and obviously Sabine. But she's on her own now. I don't know what she's going to do. Morgan, I thought she wasn't a character I was going to love too much, but I loved how much she developed in Ahsoka. I really did. Baylan is, as much as I hate to say it, I think he's only like mid to upper B. Shin is like a lower B. Morgan is a lower B as well.
I was going to give Baylan the very bottom of A after Luthen, kind of for the same reason. He is the standout, like arguably scene stealer of the entire show, like Luthen is at times in Andor. Shin, I feel like should have gotten more in Ahsoka season 1. Will get way more in the future. Morgan, I think, is still the weakest of the three, but she does go from probably a solid meh to at least a good character.
Okay, yeah, I can go with bottom of A. I don't mind that.
Oh my god, okay. We are done. Thank you
We
for
won't
watching.
need
If you made it all the way to the end of this, this was so long. Just one last look at the tier list. Obviously, with our goats, we're only going to have a few, so only 5 in the goats. Strong tiers, I think, overall, and a good dispersion. I mean, B, I think B is overstuffed. There's definitely plenty of characters in B who could go down to C, and plenty, and maybe a handful, 5 or 6, that could jump up to A. But I think we have a pretty good disparity here between A and B. These are the most popular Star Wars characters, so there was going to be less C's, D's, and F's, but I think pretty good mix here. Thank you so much for watching this video. Again, if you haven't liked the video, please do so. It helps us out tremendously. Subscribe to the channel for more tier lists. We are going to continue doing our tier lists monthly. Comment below, let us know your thoughts. Which characters do you completely disagree with our rankings? Which ones do you agree with? Which ones would you have higher or lower? Let us know. All right, thank you all so much for watching this video. Hopefully you all enjoyed it, and we will see you all in the next one.